everyone. Today we have a very exciting thing happening here on the channel. I have my first guest ever, and I'm honored that she's willing to be here with me. It is none other than my sister, Erica.
Hi.
And I'm really stoked to have you here, Erica. Erica is kind of a big deal. She actually hosts a podcast, so to come on my YouTube channel I feel like is a little bit of a step down compared to her daytime
so honored
job.
to be here. So
but
honored.
I think it's a really big deal she's here, and I'm really excited to have her here. What's also fun is, I guess the secret's out, maybe I've mentioned this before, but we also actually work together. We spend a lot of time together. We have a lot of creative energy together. So I think it's right that you eventually came on the channel. It's really nice to have you here. Anyway, I wanted to have her on actually for a specific reason, because we had been talking recently and she's brought up this topic numerous times with me, and it's been so helpful in my minimalism process and decluttering, as well as just in getting myself to do things, to get momentum and to get motivation to do things. And I was like, Erica, can you just come on the channel and talk about this? Because I could just be like, oh, my sister brought up this cool idea to me like I normally do, or I could hear it from you directly. So I'm stoked you're here to talk about it today. So can you just, I guess, get started with telling me about this idea?
So basically, I have realized something about myself, which is that I am very susceptible to friction. And I think about friction all the time because I basically realize that I need to minimize friction to survive, but also to just have a better life.
Before we go any further, what do you mean when you say friction or reducing friction in my life?
I think we as humans are more apt to go in directions where it's just easier. So wherever there's a slippery surface that's easy to slide on, we're going to slide in that direction. And if we come up against something that has more friction, it just takes that much more effort to do. And we overcome it every day and all the time, but the more that we can aim our slippery paths in the right direction, the more likely we are to do the things we want to do. And I think that's why habits are great. Habits essentially reduce friction because you're not making a decision, which is sort of friction. You're just following the habit that you've created. And that's essentially what habit creation is here's one little habit that might get me rolling. So I look for all these different ways that I can minimize friction in my life. And I think it's totally related to minimalism because ultimately I think minimalism is essentially reducing friction all around you, because when you look around, if there's less stuff, you don't have that silent to-do list that you often talk about. Putting things away, cleaning are just so much easier. Just living life feels easier because you don't feel weighed down by things. And so having less weight around you with all of your stuff just seems to minimize friction and just make everyday activities easier. Whether it's if I want to have friends over, but I feel like I have to clean up first. If I have less stuff, it's faster to clean up. I'm more likely to have people over. Maybe I'll end up saving money because I don't feel like I need to go out to hang out with people. They can just come over to my place. But I truly do think I have an issue with friction. And so I have all these little ways that I think about it in my life. So for example, I really like flat terrain.
Explain that a little bit more. What do you mean?
So growing up in the Midwest, I do think being in a city or a town or a neighborhood that's relatively flat, maybe some rolling hills, is such a comfort to me. It feels like home. I feel like flat terrain is undervalued for all the beauty it has. You don't need to have mountains to have a stunning vista that just takes your breath away. But when I am in an area that's sort of flat, it's I can see what's around me and I feel like it's easy for me to get to wherever I want to go. And again, it's that slight psychological reduction of friction, of the ease of getting places, makes such a difference to me that when I'm looking for places to live, I generally really like when I can live in an area that's not on a hill, at the bottom of a hill especially, which I've lived at the bottom of a hill before, or even at the top of a hill. If I'm in a relatively flat area, I swear I get out of my house more. I love being in walking distance of places that I want to go, and I'm just more apt to get out the door. And in general, because of my thoughts on friction, I really value when I'm looking for a place to live, someplace that reduces friction as much as possible. So I value location more than a lot of other attributes in where I live.
Interesting. So living next to a hill, in order to go anywhere, you have to like walk up the hill, and that'll just be enough friction to keep you from going and doing something. That's really interesting. I remember when I visited you in your apartment in San Francisco, and it was literally on a hill. I mean, as San Francisco apartments are. Was that a time where it was like harder for you to get out and about, would you say?
I think I'm not sure because I don't have like data on this, but every time I left the house, it felt like more of a to-do. Like, totally. Oh, I better get ready to leave the house versus like, let's just get out of here. So another example is when I'm thinking about a location to live, as I mentioned, I like to be close to lots of things. And so when I moved into my current apartment, I found one that literally I look out my window and it's relatively flat, and I see a bike path and like it's a running path. People are walking along there, walking their dogs. And I just knew that if I could see this bike path out my window, I'd be so much more likely to use it. Even if I were like on the same block, but on the other side of the block or facing the other direction, I'm just less likely to use it. So I prioritize that and let go of some other things I may have wanted in an apartment so that I could be in that location.
So finding places to live that make it less cumbersome to be active or to do the things that you want to do. That makes sense.
Habits are essentially a way to reduce friction because you're creating little ways to get yourself rolling without having to make decisions because it's a habit.
It's addressing basically the barriers to creating a healthy habit by reducing the challenges or the things that get in the way, just making it easier on yourself. So it makes sense then, living in a flat place, living in a place where you have visual access to the things you want to be doing makes it easier, makes it more likely that you go out and you do those things. In what other ways do you think you apply this idea of reducing friction in your life?
You kind of inspired me in one area of reducing friction, which is that I used to have this really high standard that if I was going to cook myself some food, it had to be like completely from scratch. And as a result, I just didn't cook nearly as often, and it just felt like so much more effort to cook. And I remember visiting you when you were in grad school, and you didn't have like a ton of cash coming in because you were a grad student. So you were always...
That is for sure.
You were like always kind of scrounging in your kitchen and like putting meals together, and you had these creative ways of putting meals together, and you found like little hacks to just make cooking easier so you could just do it all the time. And it kind of blew my mind. And so now I'm totally okay taking shortcuts in the kitchen. And so, for example, like I love eating broccoli, and I will just buy the pre-cut, pre-washed in a bag broccoli, which I think in the old days I would have thought, oh, that's a waste of plastic. Like, why do you have a bag of broccoli? But on the other hand, if I get takeout for dinner, that's a waste of more plastic and a waste of more money. So it's just like making it easier to make the right choice on a particular night makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, sometimes we don't do things because we're guilty about it, like it's bad for some reason, but then we'll make another choice that's just as bad or even worse out of guilt. And it's interesting how our neuroses or our just like thought processes can lead us to do things that aren't necessarily better. I definitely think that in decluttering, friction is a huge thing that I try to address. That if I don't have the time for it, if I haven't budgeted in the space in my weekend or in my week to find the time to declutter, I need to do that to make it easier on myself. I think a lot of it is almost like planning ahead and creating the space to do the things I want to do, whether it's creating videos for my YouTube channel or just getting a little extra thing done, creating space and time in my days to do the things I want to do is so important. And that actually reduces friction. Like if I don't have set aside time for things, then I just won't get to them. And even if I had the same time off, if I haven't planned for that specific space for this particular task, it just doesn't get done. So scheduling is one way to reduce friction, I think, in my life. So do you have other examples of reducing friction?
So some of them are like little pleasures for me. Like I have a little bamboo box that I keep all of my coffee ingredients for. So the little coffee scoop, the filters, and the pour over thing that you put filters in, and is right by where I boil water. So it's just like all right there instead of being in cupboards around the kitchen where it used to be. In my work, I find that using the Pomodoro method is really helpful, where you like set timers for little periods of time. So then it just feels like you're moving forward like inch by inch instead of trying to take on something massive all at once. And that seems to like reduce friction for me. Another thing is in our work, we do a lot of writing. And when I write, I don't start at the beginning, which I think is different from a lot of writers. They have a whole plan. They might have an outline in their heads or on paper, and then they start at the beginning. And I've talked to people at least who say they really can't write the rest until they write the beginning because everything flows from the beginning. I never ever start at the beginning. I start at whatever's easiest. So if there's a part that I'm excited about, or I really have like fresh ideas about what I'm going to say, I just start at that point somewhere in the middle, and then I craft this little like pearl, and then I go to a totally random other section that feels easy, and I do that, and I just keep like going to random sections in this outline in my head, and then I string all these pearls together, and then I'll like write the beginning, and that's the only way I can get anything done, because otherwise I just get stuck.
That makes total sense. I think I kind of write that way too, and that's one reason why I think we do work well together. I feel like part of the point with that is that sometimes it's about letting go of preconceived notions of how something should be done to open yourself up to possibilities of what's perhaps more efficient or what's just more doable for you.
Totally. Like know yourself and figure out what works for you.
Which is such a basic, simple principle. But sometimes it's hard to give ourselves, I think, permission to do things our way and to do things maybe a little bit different or in an unorthodox way.
Some other examples of reducing friction is I found that if I'm getting rid of something, I used to try to sell it on Facebook Marketplace or Poshmark or Craigslist, and I still do that. But if I'm really busy or if I don't think I'm actually going to get that much for it, my preference now is to go onto this No Buy Facebook group that I'm a part of. Is it called No Buy? Buy Nothing. I go on to my Buy Nothing Facebook group, which exists in cities everywhere, and it's way easier to get rid of something because I'm not like haggling with someone over the price. It also just brings a lot of joy because you'll post something and someone else will need it, and it makes it like a fun process and way easier when I'm downsizing.
Just in case people don't know, a Buy Nothing group is something on Facebook where in your area you can join that group, and then you can post things that you're just trying to get rid of, and people can come by and get it for free. So it's a really easy way to get rid of something without having all the hassle of figuring out where to bring it or discussing different prices if you're trying to sell something. So yeah, I mean, that is a great way.
And also, if you want something, you can go on your Buy Nothing group and see, does anyone have X? Mm-hmm. I also think sometimes that reducing friction can involve taking risks. So one time I quit my job essentially without a real proper safety net. I was quitting it to go to another gig that would be temporary, but I decided to just take the plunge because I knew I could freelance and like patch something together. And by doing that, there were some like short-term opportunities that rose up, work opportunities that I could say yes to that I was really excited about because I didn't have just the friction of having a full-time job that you can't just like quit and return to. It like made it easier for me to say yes to things. And I wouldn't recommend doing that all the time, but in that
go
case,
quit your job. No.
But it worked, for that short time, it kind of worked out well for me.
I think it's such a good point that sometimes we just get stuck in a certain way of living and we say like, oh, I can't do that because I'm too busy because of X, Y, and Z, when really I'd rather do that other thing than X, Y, and Z. And it can either be because you have a full-time job, or it can even be like, oh, I already have this hobby. I don't have time to try that new thing I've honestly always wanted to try and think I'd prefer. I think it comes back to what I was saying before about creating the space in your life for that thing. I think that's actually a lot of reducing friction, is creating the time and the space and the place for that thing in your life. And in that case, it meant leaving your full-time job to pursue other freelance opportunities. And that was a really big risk. I remember when you were doing that, you were really waffling. You were like, am I crazy to do this? Giving up this wonderful job that I have enjoyed in so many ways, but am I crazy to not keep doing that? And it ended up, I think, leading you down an incredible road in your career and was worth it.
Yeah, it kind of worked out. And then I think ultimately the idea is look at your own life and try to figure out what the friction points are for you, because I do think it's different for everyone. And the second part of this is, okay, you're recognizing friction in your own life. Now we need to recognize friction in our society at large. Because the reality is, depending on who you are, you're born with certain types of friction, and other people have different types of friction, and often those frictions are uneven, and that's where privilege comes in. And it's, I think, also as you move through life, if you're removing different parts of friction, and sometimes that means having more money, for example, you forget how much friction there is when you're not just like sliding along Teflon. You forget what it's like to actually just have sandpaper in front of you, trying to push a weight against that. And then we also just need to recognize that like different people are facing all kinds of obstacles that we're not facing.
Absolutely.
And I think the way to make the world a better place is to like reduce friction for people who have more of it and for people who need help. And also recognizing, like, I think marketers, like people all around us, like recognize that humans are susceptible to friction, whether it's like marketing to try to get you to buy things, or insurance companies who like say they're going to cover something, but they're not going to make it easy for you to get that coverage when you need it, or governments that are able to create policies that might be racist or unfair. And the way they do it is by increasing friction for certain groups of people. And so the more that we're able to to open our eyes to the friction in our world, the more we can improve it.
Wow. That really cuts to the heart of some of society's problems. Like, who would have thought this conversation would go there? But I think it is important to talk about so often. I mean, stuff I talk about on this channel all the time, I come at it probably from a place of major privilege, having the luxury, for example, to declutter or to have the time in my schedule to do those things. And then, I mean, moving away from like decluttering and minimalism, yeah, as far as friction and how it impacts people's lives, just getting a job, keeping a job,
getting to the job,
getting education, getting housing. There can be so much friction, and so much of that is tied up with inequalities that are ingrained in our society.
And sometimes purposeful creations of friction. But like people who need help so often, in order to get the help that they deserve, it's like they have to go through so much bureaucracy that basically makes it impossible for them to get the help that we think that they supposedly have access to.
Absolutely. Excellent point. Where do we go from there? I mean, that really cuts to the core.
I just think ultimately we should, we can just make our lives better by noticing like little points of friction in our life, having fun, like coming up with workarounds, because like, gosh, having dry shampoo when I just want to get out of the house is a great reducer of friction.
Totally.
And then also like recognizing the friction or lack of friction that we have.
So part of it is almost about being mindful, stepping outside of your life and looking at it, taking the time to recognize, okay, this part of my life has a lot of friction. Or like, what area of my life have I not gotten around to doing the thing that I want to do? And what friction lies in my path?
Set yourself up for success, basically.
Yeah.
Get rid of the roadblocks.
I feel like that's a lot of what adulting kind of is. It's like being an adult sometimes is hard. Again, I say this from a place of a lot of privilege, but I even find it hard sometimes to just like get everything done that I need to get done, like pay the taxes, pay the bills, like keep track of different expenses and clean house and just deal with all this stuff. It gets overwhelming, and being a more successful adult involves figuring out how to make things easier on myself in an everyday way.
Maybe people in the comments can like come up with what is their little weird friction in their life and how they can overcome it. And maybe what types of friction they see other people dealing with that maybe they can help out with a little bit.
Love that. Absolutely.
Because I could use some ideas. I'm all about making it nice and smooth sailing.
You really are. And I feel like you've become so successful at doing that in your life. And
I'm trying.
you inspire me, no joke. I know that sounds cheesy, but you do.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like this adds so much more energy to the video for me to be talking to somebody, and especially somebody that I'm really close with. I'm just so grateful to have you here, honestly. And also, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed seeing Erica on this channel, because I feel like if I get a couple of positive comments, maybe I can convince her to come by again. So if you enjoyed meeting her and having somebody else's perspective on this stuff, let me know.
And if you didn't enjoy it, you can let us know too.
No,
I don't get more alien time.
I don't want to hear that. Anyway, okay, well, thanks again. And if you ended up enjoying this video, please hit the thumbs up button. It helps it get out to more people. If you want more content on minimalism, simple living, building an empowering mindset, hit the subscribe button below. And nice, I like your gestures. Doing those things really supports the channel, so if you're willing to do that, I would appreciate it. Thanks so much for taking the time to spend this little bit with me and my sister, and I hope you have a wonderful rest
of your day. Bye.
Are you making fun of my little spiel?
I would never do that. No, I love it. I love it when you say have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye. I'm always like, oh, thank you. I will have a great day.
Oh, good. That's what I want. I want people to have a good day. Anyway, okay. Bye.
Bye.